Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
This show is happily sponsored by MetaGeek. Wi-Fi is awesome when it works, but when it doesn't, the problem is usually a mystery, unless you have Insider Office by MetaGeek. Insider Office quickly scans your wireless environment and recommends ideal channel selection to help you make your Wi-Fi awesome, and keep it that way. Check out the solutions at metageek.com to get started, and get your Wi-Fi working the way you want it to. Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Clear to Send. This is episode number 88, and I am here with my co-host Francois. How are you, Francois?
I'm very good, thank you, Roel. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's a warm evening over here in San Jose, but it's cooling down.
It's pretty warm here too.
Oh, you mean you guys get warm weather in Toronto or Canada? Yeah, we do actually. It's cold in the winter and warm in the summer. From what my wife says, the winters are ridiculously cold and gloomy. Not the best environment to be in.
Yeah. It depends if you like snow and if you like cold weather.
There's a certain level of snow that I like. I don't like all the snow or freezing snow, right in your face. Not the type of snow that I like. But yeah, hopefully checking out Toronto. Hopefully later this year, probably around November, right before the winter really hits there.
Yeah, that would be a good idea.
Cool. Well, we're here going to talk about, again, Mobility Field Day 2, and this time we're going to talk about Cape Networks, who presented on July 26th. They released some new features in their Cape sensors, and they provide a little bit more background into how they started as a company and how they went through the name change and that sort of thing. Were you able to watch the presentation, Francois?
Yes, I was able to watch PCs live, and then I watched the YouTube video afterwards of the section I missed. But it was really nice to hear from them, hear about the history, and hear about what's new. We had them on the show a few months back, I think right after WLPC. Yeah, we did have them on, and it was David who spoke with us. And they, it seems like they've been working pretty hard on their platform since then, and they had new features. We're going to talk about the new features, but it's exciting. Yeah,
that was back at episode number 74. If you guys wanted to listen to that episode, and David was the one of the co-founders who was on that episode talking about the sensors and Wi-Fi monitoring. And what's cool about or what came out of Mobility Field Day 2 with Cape Networks was their story, because they started a little over 3 years ago, and they've made quite a big jump into where they are now. They've grown quite a bit, I think, as they developed the hardware for their sensor, and they kind of went into that story during Mobility Field Day in the presentation and how they got to the hardware they have now. What do you think about that story?
Yeah, it's nice because they said during the presentation that they were not like hardware guys; they were more like software guys, right? So they went through the learning curve, I guess, and doing the hardware, and it's pretty exciting, I think, for an engineer to just do the hardware part. We never get to really do it as a network engineer, so it's pretty cool to see how they managed to create their own product and then make it evolve into something that they can produce in at a larger scale, and sell it as a very good product. If you want to know the details about the story, they come from South Africa, right? And then half of the team moved to the Silicon Valley to develop the company, And so it's a pretty cool story. So if you want to get all the details, you can watch the YouTube video and you'll see, I think David is telling the story.
Yeah. We'll send out the link into the show notes. That's cleartosend.net/88. And they did move out to Silicon Valley to raise some funds for the company, which they obviously were successful in doing. And the story is really cool because they started out in like any startup, in a small room, a bunch of guys packed in there, and they were testing various different wireless adapters that they could use for their sensor. And they burned through quite a bit of that, and then ended up building their own board, which they provide pictures of. I think that's something interesting to actually do and learn, and you really learn the whole stack, right? Not just the software stack, but also the hardware side. And that's probably something I would want to get into eventually in the future, because it really looks like they learned quite a bit, and they were able to fine tune how they want their sensor to play out with the monitoring and the dashboard that they have.
Yeah. And then they also said that they spent a lot of time working on the architecture of the cloud platform, because obviously that's where all the powerful features will come from. So yeah, they detailed that as well during the presentation. And so it's pretty cool how they have the hardware side and the software side.
Yeah, they tied it very nicely. The interface is very clean. It's literally like a bunch of circles on the main dashboard, and if everything's green, everything's good, and then you'll get yellow signal light and a red signal light if things start going south.
So for those who don't know what Cape Networks is, do you want to explain a little bit what it does and how it is useful for us?
Sure, yeah. Cape Networks, they provide you with a dashboard to gather metrics on your wireless environment, and they do that by giving you a sensor, and you can have multiple sensors in your environment. You place them in specific areas where your users are, and what it'll do, it's a nice piece of hardware. It's aesthetically pleasing, so it doesn't look like a box that really stands out and catches people's eye, but it's really nice, a well-made piece of hardware. And you place it on a desk, and it will gather statistics on your Wi-Fi network. It will test things like DHCP and DNS. It'll test internal services. So if you have an iPerf server, it'll run some iPerf tests at certain intervals. And you could also test external sites that you use. So things like Dropbox, Google Docs, Google Drive, Slack, any external services that your company uses, you can test those, and it'll give you the latest trends on that. So for DHCP, as an example, it tells me that my DHCP response time on my network. And so you could see over time what that looks like. And maybe you have a DHCP problem, or maybe if you have a DNS problem as well. It gives you a DNS lookup time based on whatever DNS servers you have set for your wireless network. This piece of hardware has a NIC in the back, so you can plug in Ethernet. It's PoE capable, so you can plug it straight into your switch. And then you configure from the dashboard what SSID you want to connect to, and the dashboard will push those settings to the sensor. What's really cool, I think, one of my favorite features is that there's a 3G card that's built in. So if you have that feature enabled, which you'll have to contact support at Cape Networks, you won't have to plug in the Ethernet cable to the sensor. You can actually just power it up with a regular power adapter and place it anywhere, because there could be some locations where you don't have Ethernet or power over PoE to the box, or you just want to place it anywhere, right? Because it does come with mounting hardware as well, so you can mount it on the wall, for example. But I think that is by far one of my favorite features of Cape Networks.
And also, I'm guessing if you connect it to the LAN using the Ethernet cable and you don't have internet connectivity,
it could use that 3G card.
Connection is useful there to upload the data to their cloud platform.
Yeah, what's really neat is, let's say you do lose power, whether it's PoE or it's through the adapter, the power adapter. It has a battery on the sensor, which will stay up for close to about a minute. And so it's kind of the last breath of the sensor. And in that moment, it will start uploading some statistics to the dashboard. And that way you could see, okay, what's happening right before this power outage. Is there something going on? Or, it's just part of the whole troubleshooting process.
And since you don't have power, the only way to do it is through the 3G connection. It's pretty smart.
Yeah, it's a really cool feature. I think they're using the T-Mobile network, and I believe they use the T-Mobile network because of where they're able to get that 3G service. I think that provided them the most coverage everywhere, because they are an international company. They're, I think, in over 10 countries where they have clients. So especially in South Africa, they got to have connectivity to locations where there might not be good internet or backhaul. So maybe 3G is possibly the best way to get that data.
On the map, it looks like they don't have anyone in Canada yet.
I think you're a good candidate for that.
Yeah. They should get in touch with me and
they should
find people.
They should have Canada soon, because I know Brennan Martin was a delegate and he should have received a Cape sensor to test out.
Oh yeah. So here you go. You have at least one sensor in there somewhere in Saskatchewan.
Yep, that's for sure.
All right. So basically it gives you the view of the Wi-Fi network from the client side, right? Usually we, as network engineer, we have our, APs controllers, and we can see some statistic from there, right? But that would be the statistic reported from the infrastructure side.
Mm-hmm.
With Cape Network, the sensor is acting as a client, and so we get the view of the Wi-Fi network from the client's perspective.
Yeah, it's a little bit better than using the access point, because the access point could be in the ceiling, or it could be, it's just not near the client. So this is probably the best way to get closest to the client without having to put some sort of agent on people's computers. It's not quite the client, but I think it's pretty good, right? It's you, as long as you place it where the clients are and it's not being blocked by some obstruction that could mess with the statistics.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, is like, where would you place the sensor? Like, did they talk about like the ideal placement for the sensor? Would it be like on the desk next to a laptop, or on the wall, or did they talk about that?
I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure they briefly spoke about it. But personally, the way I would deploy this sensor is near the user. So on a desk, in a conference room, for example. But I don't typically advise putting it on the wall, because that's not where users are. They're not right by the wall, unless you're at a gym maybe and there's people near the sides of the walls and they're standing with phones. That would probably make sense, because it's going to be a little bit higher than where users are actually located. So if they're sitting at a desk, that's about 4 feet high, 3 to 4 feet high. So you typically want to have it there on a desk next to where laptops are, for example. So if you've got a room full of people and there's a bunch of desks everywhere, you might want to place it in the middle of that room, or a little bit farther from the AP, wherever you're having issues. That's where you want to place it.
Yeah, because if you place it right underneath the AP, you're pretty much always going to have good performance, right? Mm-hmm. Except if you have like interference but I guess the location is very strategic. When you deploy the sensors, you have to think about where the APs are and where I want to put my sensors, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they kind of went into that. I mean, I don't think they're going to necessarily tell you where to put your sensors, but I say place them where you think are high critical areas, like a conference room, or next to your VIPs areas,
CEO office.
Mm-hmm. So like on the desk there, or it just depends on aesthetically how people like it, but that, or where you have trouble areas and you're trying to troubleshoot or keep track of the changes that you've made, and that's a good way to see a trend of you made a certain change and you want to see if it's an improvement from the client side.
Yeah, that's a nice feature. Yeah, if you're having an issue and you've been troubleshooting for a long time, you just drop a sensor and see how it evolves.
Yep, exactly. And so let's see. Let's go through. I mean, I have some notes from when I sat there, and we kind of went through when they started, which was a great story, and hopefully I can possibly share some pictures that they included as part of their presentation, because what they would do is actually test the hardware itself, and they went through some growing pains where it was placed in environments that might have been hostile environments, and so the hardware didn't hold up. So they've gone through that kind of growing pains and had a new enclosure that they've created. And then they actually were putting them together by hand initially. I don't know if you remember seeing those slides, and that's quite a lot of work, but as a startup, that's what you got to do sometimes to get things rolling until you have that the revenue and the funds to actually have it go through in production somewhere where they have the equipment to build out many of them for distribution. Hey everyone, let's take a break to think about Wi-Fi for a moment. It's awesome when it works, right? But when it doesn't, the problem is usually a mystery. If you're sick of simply rebooting your devices and crossing your fingers every time your Wi-Fi goes down, let the Wi-Fi experts at MetaGeek make the invisible visible. Their powerful diagnostic solutions visualize interference from external Wi-Fi and non-Wi-Fi sources, and will help you configure your wireless network for maximum coverage and throughput. From a weekend enthusiast to an enterprise IT professional, MetaGeek has everything you need to make Wi-Fi awesome and keep it that way. Check out their solutions at metageek.com to take your first step towards awesome Wi-Fi, because I use Channelizer to actually visualize the spectrum whenever I'm troubleshooting an issue that seems to be coming from maybe a non-Wi-Fi source, for example. And I've also used the Insider Office as a network scanner to figure out what wireless networks are in the area, what channels they're using, and which channels I should use. And just a little tip, you could also plug in your Wi-Fi DBX and use that with Insider Office to get some Channelizer Lite, for example. You can see some spectrum analysis with Insider Office. Well, anyhow, if you guys are interested, take a look at metageek.com to see what you can do for your Wi-Fi network.
Yeah, I like the pictures. Maybe we can share them.
And then the hardware itself and what is it running? I guess some people might have questions. It's actually running Linux. I'm not sure what flavor of Linux, but it is running Linux, and it has a dual band card capable of doing MIMO. And then we mentioned the Ethernet port on the back and the 3G cellular that's within that unit as well. Now the 3G part, I believe you do have to request that feature to be enabled. I don't think that's enabled by default.
So when you say dual band MIMO, when you connect to a Wi-Fi network, is it going to connect? Can you choose on which band you want to connect, or it's just going to simulate a normal dual band client and connect to,
It will connect to both.
They own
it does tests on both. So if you specify the SSID, if it sees both the 2.4 and the 5, it'll do test on both bands. And there's an interval that is pre-configured on there. It's a core test, and that's something you could modify if you want to. And so every 5 minutes, it'll test Wi-Fi association.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, you can't change that. I think that's one of the default settings.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and I just found the feature I've been looking for. So why don't we go talk about the new features they released from Mobility Field Day 2. One of the biggest features I like that came out of it was the packet capture, the rolling packet capture.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what the rolling packet capture is?
I think it's the ability to just get a packet capture whenever you want. So basically in the background, it's just going to capture packets, and then if you want it, you just demand it. It's like a packet capture on demand.
Yeah, pretty much. Each sensor gets a preset size bucket, and that's 50 megs for the rolling packet capture. And there's two types of packet captures it'll do. There's the light version, which just grabs the headers, the radio tap headers also. And then there's the full version, which captures the whole thing. But obviously that will fill up your bucket much more quickly. But if you're just doing basic troubleshooting, the PCAP Lite will probably do it for you. Unless you need further troubleshooting, then you can do the full packet capture. And so I just found that feature. So if you have this CAPE sensor and you go to your settings, what you want to do is head over to the testing section, and there's two tabs, the test configuration and the core configuration. If you click on the core configuration tab, and right there is a setting called packet capture, and for me it was disabled, and you just got to enable it, and that enables it globally on all your sensors. And within the sensor itself in the settings, there is a function to, if you edit the sensor, you tell it what kind of PCAP you want, so you can disable it, obviously. And then there's PCAP Lite and PCAP Full. So if I do that, I'll save it. I should be able to go back to my sensor, and then under the actions area, there is a packet capture right underneath the raw data download, and that's request PCAP file. So then I can go ahead and do that, and then it tells you that it's waiting for the file to be uploaded from the sensor. So it'll do that either through the Ethernet adapter that's connected through your switch, or it'll send it up through the 3G network. Then you should be able to open that with Wireshark.
So basically, if you have a user complaining, you can go back and to the sensor that's near the user and try to see what happened.
Yep, pretty much. So I'm going to see if I can bring this up during our recording, and I'll provide more detail. But that's one of the ways to see exactly what's going on your network from the client's point of view. So I think that is an awesome feature, and to have it as a rolling packet capture is a really cool idea, because if you can get in front of that issue fairly quickly, you can just request that PCAP file and try to figure out what's going on. Or if you have a non-technical user, what I envision is someone could send a sensor to them, right, and just have them plug it in, and that's one way to see what exactly is going on.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yep. So the really cool part is that the PCAP files do include the radio tap headers, and you'll be able to see that within Wireshark.
So with the PCAP, you're going to get a sense of the RF environment where the sensor is, right? But if a specific client has an issue, you're not going to capture this traffic, or is it like, basically my question is it capturing every packets on the channel, or is it just capturing the traffic going to the sensor? You see what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something, this is the first time I'm requesting this, and we're doing it live on this recording. So we'll see what exactly it'll capture, and I could add that into the show notes if I don't see this uploaded fairly quickly. But I would assume it's whatever's going through the sensor. I don't believe it's a like a promiscuous frame capture that grabs anything in the air. I think it's just relating to this client. Because if you want to, for example, troubleshoot 802.1x, you want to capture it from this client and see what could the issue be, right? If maybe it's a cert problem that you're running into, or something else, you'd want to see it from an actual client's point of view, and probably not from just frames in the air.
This is nice, because I'm thinking, let's say you have a 802.1x issue, and you're trying to troubleshoot and fix the issue, and you need the user to test to make sure that it works for them. If you have a sensor, you could use a sensor to test yourself, right? Without disrupting the
right. Yeah, and that's
the user, right?
And that's pretty much ideal, so you don't have to consume the user's time as you're troubleshooting. You can place a sensor there in that area, or even try to get ahead of any issues where you might think there would be an influx of people, and you could set up your usual test, right? You want to test your DNS, make sure that's working, your DHCP, and so if you're doing a packet capture and you're not getting a DHCP address, obviously you'd get that red light in the dashboard saying there's a DHCP problem. And maybe you need to do some further troubleshooting. You could do a packet capture and get the exact details of what that DHCP issue would be and forward that along to the right person. That's one example. Or you want to constantly make sure that, I don't know, Google Docs is working because your company is always using Google Docs. You might want to gather those stats. And if there is an issue, is it the wireless network or is it something external to you that you can't figure out? You could use different points in the with the data to figure out, all right, it's not a wireless issue because I'm not seeing loss, for example, or you can combine the latency, the packet loss and jitters, and try to relate that to what you see on your packet captures for Google Docs. But yeah, those are some examples of how we could use it.
Yeah, because they give you a lot of information, like from the sensor, you get a lot of Wi-Fi stats, right? You get the channel utilization. They also give you other stats like jitter, packet loss, latency. And you can also see the Wi-Fi environment. So basically, it's going to scan all the Wi-Fi channels and report which SSID are, the sensor sees.
Yeah, and you just want to see how well is your wireless network healthy, as an example. So right now I have a yellow light on DNS, and if that was my DNS server, I would want to look at why is my DNS server providing high lookup times. But right now I'm using Google's DNS server, so there's some latency there. It's taking 129 milliseconds to do a DNS lookup. So it kind of helps you go into the right direction much faster rather than looking from scratch, right? A user says, hey, Wi-Fi is not working, can you fix it? Well, where do you start? Where do you begin? The sensor is going to help you figure out where you can start looking for the root cause.
Yeah. All right, so that's one of the new features, right? The on-demand packet capture.
Yep. Yeah, I think we beat that one.
Yeah, it's still waiting.
Yeah, so I requested it about 6 minutes ago. It's still waiting. The other feature is the support for ETLS, which I was waiting for because I was trying to troubleshoot a network, or I wasn't trying to troubleshoot a network. I was putting a sensor into the network at another site, and this site was using 802.1x, and I didn't know. They were just telling me, here's your username and password, and then my sensor just wouldn't connect, and it was because of the certificate issue. It was not just wasn't joining, and from there I couldn't tell because there was no ETLS support. And hopefully now with this support we can actually do some testing with 802.1x, and I'll be playing with that in the near future to see what that looks like and what details you can get from there.
So you have to upload the certificate on the sensor, I'm guessing, a client certificate and the root certificate.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. I haven't tried it. So if I go through the settings to edit my SSID, you would actually click on Enterprise, and it's either password, which is username and password, which what I was using initially for that test. But it turns out you gotta use the certificate option, which I don't believe was there the last time I looked. And you can put your username, you could upload the cert file, and then put the file passphrase and go from there.
Okay.
So I'll be trying that out in the future with my Radius server to see what kind of metrics you can gather from there. Maybe it'll tell you how long it takes to authenticate and and things like maybe your cert has expired.
Yeah, that would be nice if you get the certification. Certificate errors and stuff like this, right?
Yeah, and you could get alerts on these things. Right now I have the alerts disabled, but when you're testing it, there's different thresholds you can set, and when you exceed those thresholds, they can send alerts through email, it could send it through text, and you tell it what severity you want those alerts from. So do you want warnings and errors? You can enable that. Or if you just want the errors, you can just enable alerts for that. And you can tell it, I want those alerts during, regular business hours, or do you also want it after hours?
And so how much traffic does the sensor generate on the Wi-Fi?
It actually doesn't, I don't think it puts that much strain on the wireless network because it's doing the tests at intervals.
Okay.
And some of these are simple lookups like DNS or HTTPS pings. I could imagine if you put a bunch of these sensors together, you could probably generate a good amount of traffic, but I don't think it's that big of a hit.
iPerf.
Yeah, the iPerf could put some load on the wireless network for sure, because I set it up and you could tell it the kind of tests you want to do, either a download or an upload, and then you could actually set the maximum bandwidth. And right now mine's just set to 0 for unlimited, but then I can tell it how long I want the test to go for. And so if you say run this test for 600 seconds, that's at unlimited, whatever the max bandwidth it could acquire, then that's going to be quite a lot on the network if you have multiple sensors doing that. And then you could also tell it at what's the frequency of this test. Is it you want it every 10 minutes, every 20, every 4 hours? So you can get kind of granular on that.
Okay, so I guess you choose whenever you want to launch. It's not something that's happening in the background every second or so.
Yeah, it's not every second. It's at minimum every 10 minutes you could set it. But then it's the test duration, I think, what you want to look at also. So you don't want to set it too short, but you also don't want to do it too long.
Yeah.
So you could set also like, okay, what's that bandwidth you're looking for? If I do a test, I want to aim for 10 megabits per second as an example. So I think that's a cool test, and in the combination of doing that with the packet captures and having support for eTLS, you almost have that full range of capabilities as a client. Oh, and also the other new feature, which we haven't even talked about, was the splash page support. I'm sure that's a common request to Cape Networks, because how many of us have a splash page for your guest network as an example, and you need to make sure that stays up, and how long does it take a user to go through the splash page? But what was the most difficult part of this, I thought, was how do you hit the agree button? How do you do yes, I agree to these terms and say continue?
Yeah.
And so the way that they're doing that is you actually have to work with the support team. They have the standard. So there's a couple of services that have a splash page, the most common one. So I think they have that down. But if it doesn't work for you, you would have to work with them and trying to figure out how you can hit that agree button or check the box. I think they use HTML and look for those fields. But yeah, I haven't done that splash page testing yet, but I literally just got this Cape sensor up and running right before we started recording.
So what about if you need an access code, or if you need a username and password to log in through the captive portal?
Yeah, see, that's where it gets really complicated. I'm not sure how they would be able to do that if that code changes every single time. You would most likely have to set a static code for a specific test account to make sure that the splash page successfully loads and you can get through it and then get to the internet. So I would assume that's how they're testing, and I'm sure you can come up with more detailed tests, but the basics are making sure it loads, and I'd like to see this tested at hotels, because how long does it take a splash page to load, and then how long does it take you to even get past the splash page and get onto the internet and running?
Yeah. And then you're going to have timeouts, right? It's going to have to re-authenticate after a timeout, I'm guessing. Maybe it's built into the sensor.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see how that goes, and hopefully I'll be able to test that out as well. And then
take it next time you travel.
Yeah, take it with me. That's a good idea. The other new feature, actually, we almost forgot about this, is its tie-in with Wi-Fi Explorer. So if you have a Mac and you're using Adrian Granato's application Wi-Fi Explorer, I don't know if you need Pro for this, but there is a feature in Wi-Fi Explorer where you can add a remote sensor. And so within Cape sensors, if you go to your settings of the sensor itself, you have to enable that feature. And so that feature, it's just a little section that says Wi-Fi Explorer. And I think by default it is disabled. And then you enable it and you tell it how long you want to enable it for, either for the next hour up to 24 hours. And then you open your Wi-Fi Explorer, and in the drop down at the top where you can start scanning or stop the scanning, if you click on the drop down and add a remote sensor, you just put the IP of that sensor, and you should be able to scan it, get the data into Wi-Fi Explorer and see what the sensor sees. So that's pretty neat. I can see that being used as...
I think you need Explorer Pro.
Okay.
Wi-Fi Explorer Pro in order to have access to this feature, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It sounds like a pro feature. I can see this working for, let's say someone calls you and they need help and you want to look at the sensor. You could VPN in and connect to the sensor that way. That's one example I was thinking about.
Yeah. If you have one of your colleagues on site and he's calling you to get an advice or something, you can just say, okay, connect to your Wi-Fi Explorer. I'm going to check what I see from the dashboard. And then, even if you're remote, you get a sense of what's going on the RF side.
Yep. And that's about it with the new features, I think.
They also have a map now.
Yeah, the map's kind of cool.
Your sensor on the map.
Yeah, it just automatically places it there on the map. And I remember when I first saw it, I was like, I don't remember configuring the location. And it uses Google's API to figure out the location, and it's pretty accurate.
Okay. It's not the NSA, right?
Hey, it could be. I'm sure the NSA can get any kind of data.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of like your phone. How your phone uses the Wi-Fi and the obviously it uses the GPS as well. Wi-Fi, GPS, and the cellular connection to locate the device.
Mm-hmm.
So here you don't have the 3G, right? You only have the Wi-Fi on.
On this sensor, I only have the Wi-Fi. I don't know if I have the 3G card enabled on this. I do have another sensor that does have the 3G card, and I put that upstairs in my house, and it just has power, and that's how I test the connection to my bedroom. And that's important for the family.
That would be interesting to see if you get different locations.
Yeah,
or if it's only using your public IP from your house.
Yeah, I haven't.
You know what I mean?
I haven't dove into that quite to really see how the location is transferred. But yeah, I could try to figure out how that works. And that's all I have for Cape Networks. Is there something else you want to provide info on, Francois, or you have any questions about it?
No, I just think it's it looks like a nice device, but it looks like the platform they're building can be much more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually, it's kind of like all these companies that presented that mobility field there, because they have the cloud and because they have so much data. It seems like, we didn't reach the full capacity of what we can do with all this information and stuff. So I feel like, we're still going to see great things from Cape Networks. Maybe they're working on new stuff. We don't know, like new products or I'm not sure, but it feels like they built their cloud infrastructure very strong, and it feels like it hasn't reached the full potential. I don't know how you see it, but that's kind of like how I see it.
Yeah, I can see a lot more capabilities coming out of the sensor itself. Who knows what they're cooking up? They didn't hint. I don't think they hinted at anything, but I'm sure they've got something in the pipeline. I mean, these were some big features that they released, and I'm sure more requests will come out of this, and we'll see a lot more support for especially the splash page support. I think that's probably going to be a big one for a lot of people. And then seeing what else we can do with PCAPs. Maybe we should be able to upload that to a repository somewhere, like CloudShark would be a good example of tying that in. Anything else?
I'm thinking maybe, within the sensor, maybe adding a Spectrum card. And if you don't have the luxury to have like, Cisco APs with Clean Air or whatever, you could get a sense of what the Spectrum looks like, and maybe get a remote spectral, with waterfall view.
Yeah, I can see that happening. Having a pro version of the sensor itself with that third radio in there just dedicated to spectrum analysis, and then being able to see spectrum on the dashboard, or maybe even doing what we do with Wi-Fi Explorer and with the remote view, be able to display the spectrum on Wi-Fi Explorer as well over the channels, or even through Channelizer as a remote sensor. I can see that happening.
So I think it's just the beginning for them, and I guess we'll see where it goes. But it's very interesting.
Yep,
it's nice. We always say, like, we have a lot of client issues. So being able to get obviously it's not going to be the exact same client as the one you have on your network, right? But being able to see the Wi-Fi network from the client perspective is always useful. I on my Mac, I like to use the Debuki applications, because it does that for you. And you can see the different data rates from the client side, the receive transmit data rate, and the RSSI, and all this information from the client side. So it's and sometimes for some devices is that some information that is not easy to see. Like on an iPhone, it's not easy to see,
right?
The signal strength, the which BSSID you joined, and stuff like this, right? Basic stuff.
Gets us a little bit closer, but not quite there. But it's better than nothing.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, that's it, I think, for Cape Networks, and looking forward to seeing what else comes out from that. And if there's anything else you guys want to see, leave us some comments in the show notes. That's cleartosend.net/88. We'll have the links to the videos that came out of Mobility Field Day 2. I'll provide some screenshots of the new features I see, and we'll see it from there. Anything else you want to add, Francois?
No, just feel free to watch the videos. It's really nice to understand the history, or to know about the history of a company. It's kind of like when you study a protocol, and if you know about the history of the protocol, it's always easier to remember. That's how I see it. But for a company, it's kind of like the same, right? If you know the history, you get it's like if you get more interested in it. It's just watch the videos, and then you'll also see or hear about the answers, because the delegates ask a lot of good questions. So you'll also see the answers they had for the delegates from the Mobility Field Day.
Cool. All right, well, that is the end of our show. If you guys want to find out more, head over to the show notes again. That's cleardescent.net/88. You can find me on Twitter at Roel Dionisio, and also the Clear Descent Twitter is at Clear Descent. Francois, where can people find you?
On Twitter at Vergès Francois, and on my website, samfirenetworks.com/blog.
Awesome. All right, everybody, you guys have a great week, and we will see you on the next episode.
See you guys. Have a good week.